Welcome back to Sunrise. We're looking at software development in Nigeria. Mr. Oke, you were talking about, before we went on that break, you asked the question, how much economic benefits is Nigeria drawing from our presence on social media space? You want to say that that is what will make a difference as regards driving traffic towards software development and local content usage?
Yeah, yes. What I'm just trying to tie from that description is the fact that quite a number of the Nigerian population presently spend quite a lot of time on the social media. And it is clear that even for those that are doing digital marketing through the social media and through the online platforms, they actually take advantage of the presence, and they know that there is so much traffic towards the Facebook, towards Instagram, and the rest of them. But the truth there is that as a government and as a nation, we've not taken advantage of that properly. Now, if you look at part of the discussions that have been held this morning on Sunrise so far, we've talked about the legal system, we've talked about the education system. Those are areas whereby we could actually thrive as a country if we decide to put in quite a lot of local content, software development in that direction. There is a limit to how much of the software that is being imported can do for us as a country. No one out there, no white guy out there would understand our way of life totally. So if something has been developed for the European market or has been developed for the American market and you bring it here, the copy and paste would not work. So we need our people to actually, develop our own software that basically works for us day in, day out. If you look at, for instance, now there are quite a whole lot of hubs scattered around the country. There are quite a lot of hubs in Lagos and Port Harcourt, even in the East. What I believe the government should be doing in this case is the fact that they should basically support these hubs, support them in a direction or in a way whereby they can actually do more than they are currently doing. And this, what it does is that it actually helps the developers. The government can decide to create some kind of subsidy program that can actually support these developers. Now, we talked about the trust factor of the software developers in Nigeria in terms of their attitude to development, in terms of their attitude to work and all of that. You would definitely find that amongst them because of the fact that they are not exclusive. They operate within the same constraints that we operate in as Nigerians. So if you look at the Facebook, for instance, now, Facebook has a campus. When you go to the Facebook campus, you have everything there. So once you are there, it's like you're home away from home. You work there, you exercise there, you sleep there, you eat there, a whole lot of things happen there. So there's quite a whole lot of convenience built around that. So if governments can actually take advantage of the youth population and actually take advantage of the hubs, what they're currently doing as well, subsidize these hubs, look around them, what are their programs, what are their 5-year programs, what are their 10-year programs, what are they doing with the young people that are developing the different software, because they see all of these things. Look at the Taxify and the Uber and the rest of them, how they've turned around the way we actually live our lives, how we actually, go about taxi hailing. It's totally different from how it used to be in the past. And there are quite a lot of young people out there now that are thinking that way. They want to change the way we shop, the way we live our lives, the way we work, and the way we play. So if the government can actually do quite a lot in terms of creating subsidy for these people and creating the infrastructure, giving them the infrastructure, necessary infrastructure that can actually help them, enable them to do more than what they are doing right now, we believe that, we would actually, go far than we are currently doing. And the $400 million fund that is being actually exported, I mean, the capital flight that we're currently experiencing would actually diminish gradually. Yes, it's not a lot of money, but that is actually the amount that have been captured. It could be much more than that. And the truth there is that going down the line, 2, 3 years, 4 years down the line, that amount could triple, and it could be a lot more in terms of our population, in terms of how we want to live our life, in terms of how we want to do the things we want to do. So we cannot continue empowering the youth outside of this country, we cannot continue to empower foreigners when our own youths are there, that we can do quite a lot with their capacity as well.
Mr. Kerami, that empowering the youth here in Nigeria, there's something he mentioned. He said the trust factor. You know, when we're talking about the private sector and then I want to buy quality, that trust factor is there. So put that on one side. But we've heard the government talk about broadband in the country. broadband, internet access across the country, you find out that you have more access sort of in urban areas like Lagos, Abuja, and maybe in some parts of Port Harcourt. But you go to some other places, access is not as much as it should be. Is it a question of demand? Because maybe the people, they are not putting demand on the broadband that's been provided or the access that's there? Or is it that the providers would rather stay in Lagos, Abuja, than go to these rural areas where some of these developers might be hiding, some of them just picking up coding?
Well, I think that's an interesting thing. And again, like I said, so private business people follow the money. That's what entrepreneurship is about. So, expectedly, where's the population?
Urban areas.
In the urban areas.
But sometimes the developers might be in the rural areas.
So hang on. And that's why I say there's a balance. When I spoke about the role of a chaperone, in this case, government, that's supposed, you know, when we do things, there's a word we use, moderating. And what moderating means is that you are trying to introduce something to see, rather than something going in a particular direction, you want to probably change the direction. That's what governments are. Like I said earlier, we could have been roaming in the wild. What's the job of governments? So the job of governments, in a lot of instances, so we have intervention, we have moderation, we have direction. Right. So if, as a business person, the ideal thing is, I'm going to follow the money, it's not my business to develop the nation, I'll go the way I want to go. But it is now the responsibility of somebody else, who is a moderator, to ensure that the goal of nation building is attained. And if the goal of nation building is to be attained, using some of the resources of private entrepreneurs, then the moderator, in this case the government, would have to do something, either by way of intervention or by way of incentivization, just to ensure that broadband can go into rural areas. And we can talk about all these issues. And for those of us that study development economics, talking about rural, urban migrations, and so many other issues. So, but essentially, and anywhere in the world too, they are what you call the hotspots, the hubs. So for example, if you go to the United States, well, traditionally, so you see a lot of things happening in Silicon Valley. Right. But again, just like Chineye has mentioned, the moment the internet came in, internet virtually democratized knowledge, such that today you can be in Lagos, you can actually be in the remotest part of Lagos, and your mentor is in America, and you are having more or less video conferences. You get to see yourselves, you see your emotions, you talk, you have the knowledge. Almost the entire curriculum of what happens in Harvard or MIT is available online today. But essentially, there is nothing wrong with entrepreneurs saying they want to make maximum profit from urban areas. It is the responsibility of government to say, hang on, there are potentials for development of the nation in some other parts. And then either by intervention, which has been suggested, might be subsidy. And subsidies, for me, as far as I'm concerned, cannot be a way of life. Subsidies must be introduced for a short while to kickstart. I mean, I say subsidies like priming a pump. You know, the idea of priming a pump. You need to get water out of the place. So you pour water initially to get much more water out of it. So if government is introducing subsidy, there must be a goal. And there must be a program. And somebody must be able to monitor the progress of that program to be able to achieve it. And so clearly, broadband is one of the issues. But today, people don't even talk about broadband anymore as such in Nigeria. Why? Because it's almost ubiquitous. And I think the real issues are...
Not in the rural areas. It is not really ubiquitous.
Well, might be not. But again, when you look at where the hotbed for development is, so like Chineye has mentioned, so what makes you develop a lot of these things are your imaginations. And your imaginations are also subject to what you've seen before. It's difficult to imagine some things that you have never conceived. It's conception. So you realize that indeed the hotbed will remain in the urban areas.
Okay.
But the real question is how much demand are we able to generate?
Okay.
And how the demand that we are generating, how much value are we capturing locally? Those are the real issues.
Talking about demand, Chineye, correct me if I'm wrong, I surmise that we have more software developers being trained and being, these days. If the demand is so little, then how come the schools are churning out more developers? It must be that there is something that they're doing.
You're 100% correct. And this is, earlier we talked about some numbers. So when we look at numbers, we have to contextualize them, right, properly.
Okay.
So currently, I would say that there is a hidden economy, and it's a large part of the Nigerian economy. And that hidden economy includes the part that we don't see, which is the number of people engaged in work for companies and organizations outside of this country that are earning income directly. So some of our developers, a lot of our developers, I would even say, are actually working for companies abroad. So there is demand. The demand, when we talk about demand, so there's local demand, right? And then there's global demand. And software I mean, as far as borders are concerned, it's meaningless.
No borders.
It's permeable, right? So software travels across borders. Services travel across. So when you talk about software, it's an ecosystem. It's not just software development alone. There are software services. In the same way that you make a call today to British Airways to move your flight and you're talking to somebody in India, it's the same way that there are developers in Nigeria working for people across the globe. The question then is, when we speak about demand, what do you do to stimulate local demand so that you start to increase the quantum of those people and then their value in the ecosystem? So a software developer here who earns $50,000, who is a software developer in Nigeria, would probably take $50,000 for the same amount, for the same work that a developer, an equivalent developer in the United States would probably be paid $150,000. So we are getting the benefit of that, but the question is, how is that being streamed? Is there a manner in which we can stream that, mainstream those kind of developments and pull them into a system that works for all of us? And this is where the policies become critical. So I don't think anyone is saying ban software that is not Nigerian. No, what we're saying is that, again, use the metaphor. We built a house, or we're in the process of building a house. Aren't you going to reserve some rooms for the family? Or are you going to give it out to outsiders? If it's a hotel, then anybody can come and go. But if you're deliberate about building a house and you want people to live in there, particularly your young people, you can't have a country that is 60%, there's 60% of whom fall into the youth bracket, and you don't have a policy around the digital economy in which they're going in. And that's where we're not saying there isn't a policy, we're saying that these type of movements around local content, local software, reinforces that policy. And I'll tell you, what we need to do as a country isn't really that difficult. If this country were to determine that things like education, things like technology, were part of critical national infrastructure, if we started to think of critical national infrastructure beyond power lines and protecting our borders, and we started thinking about the critical national, because what is critical, what makes it critical is that it's national infrastructure that works to build a better society and a better standard of living for its own people. You don't have national infrastructure for the purpose of foreigners. You have national infrastructure for your own people. You would understand then that the broadband policies, for instance, if we had broadband or connectivity or fiber as critical national infrastructure, we wouldn't be struggling right away, which is the thing that prevents you from putting the fiber in the ground. We would protect it the same way we protect our power lines, pipelines, the same way we protect our oil lines. If we considered education to be part of our critical national infrastructure, we wouldn't allow it to collapse. And we would inject it and we'll protect it. And we'll allocate resources in a proper way to ensure that that natural infrastructure, that critical national infrastructure itself is protected. So what is happening is that there's a little bit of a displacement between the way the country says, where the country is saying it is going, and actually what is in place to make it go in that direction. Okay. And a few things are working.
Just hold your thoughts. Yes. We'll talk about those few things when we come back from this break.